Thank you so much for watching LandumC Goes There. Please subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification button. There were some great movies that came out in the 60s. And part of it was because there was a lot of social change going on in the U.S. and around the world. Society was becoming more permissive, whether you liked that or not. Morals had been loosened, and you saw baby boomers entering their teens and 20s. This change played out big time in cinemas. American movies had to toe a very conservative line under the restrictive Hays production code well into the 50s. But then all of a sudden in the 60s, directors realized the power that they had to shock audiences as well as entertain them. And they did just that. Here's a list of 7 films that kind of pushed the limits in different ways for that era. In 1962, the original Manchurian Candidate came out. Now this one is one that if you're a conspiracy theorist and a little bit paranoid, you'd love it. This is a very dark and complex film, and it revolves around the plot line that near the end of the Korean War, a platoon of U.S. soldiers is captured by communists and brainwashed. Following the war, the platoon is returned home, and Sergeant Raymond Shaw is lauded as a hero by the rest of his platoon. But the platoon commander, Captain Bennett Marco, finds himself plagued by strange nightmares, and together with fellow soldier Alan Melvin, they race to uncover a terrible plot. Although the plot is a paranoid brew of brainwashing, conspiracy, and treason, and at the time of its release, it was considered pretty far-fetched. But as time has gone on, this seems more realistic and relevant in today's world. In 1960, Psycho came out, and this one would be one for any of you horror film buffs. You have to say that in this one, Hitchcock single-handedly created the slasher genre. Critics were appalled by Hitchcock's dive into this style of movie, and audiences were authentically terrified by what happened on the big screen. There were tales of panicked people fleeing theaters, heart attacks happening, and actual cinema faintings when they watched the movie. This show smashed conventional movies in quite a few ways. The film starts out with an opening lunchtime rendezvous, and then there's the premature killing off of a major star, which just didn't happen. Plus, we can't forget the celebrated shower scene that sticks out in everybody's mind. Plus, its creepy surprise ending is a jaw-dropper. In 1967, we had the pleasure of being introduced to The Graduate. This one is for you more romantic comedy fans that have somewhat of a kinky side. Mike Nichols took a real slash at 1960s society in this film. He created a reverse May-September romance at its core that left everybody with their tongues hanging out. Dustin Hoffman plays a young, completely directionless college graduate who is seduced by a decadent cougar played by Anne Bancroft. He finally escapes into some more age-appropriate arms, that being her daughter's, although the film's famous, ambiguous final scene leaves a question mark over the viability of that choice. The big plus for this movie was its timeless Simon and Garfunkel soundtrack. If you love crime in 1967, you were introduced to one of the best, that being Bonnie and Clyde. Although gangster movies were not really shocking in 1967, the violence in this film was very realistic, and it was startling. The movie closed quickly after its initial release. Critics denounced it because it glamorized the life of killers, and the finale, along with its very callous blend of humor and murder. It went on later on to be re-released and got nominated for 10 Academy Awards. Midnight Cowboy came out in 1969, and this would be a film that if you like movies about New York City, you'd probably like this one. But it's not for everybody. Low-life junkies, Times Square hustlers, and free-love hippies are portrayed throughout in this very rough view of New York City. Its grimy and realistic portrayal of New York City's underbelly was too challenging for the censorship board. The film went on to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. And then there's The Wild Bunch from 1969. If you're a Sam Peckinpah fan like I am, this one's for you. It's a revisionist Western that will completely knock your socks off. Peckinpah just shocked everybody on the big screen. Nothing like this had ever been seen. He confronted audiences with things that had never been filmed like this in Hollywood. And everything he did in the film was precisely choreographed. And he turned all of these skirmishes into forms of art forms that still stick around today. He was the very first to put it in your face like he did in this film. Now in 1966, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf shocked us in a much different way. It's unsurprisingly based on a play of the same name, and much of the film really does feel like it's playing out on a stage. The acting is out there and really bold. The dialogue is very fast-paced and snappy, and much of the film is confined to a single location. It may have not been the normal themes that Hollywood was pushing the boundaries with in this film, but it feels real radical for its presentation and real intimate setting. It's a loud and shocking movie, not so much for what's seen, but what is said by the characters and how they say such things to each other. Years after its release, this film still feels very intense and passionate, which leads you to believe that it was much more likely to be that way back in 1966. Take a look at some of these spectacular movies from what I consider a great time to sit in a theater and enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.